Born into a world of opulence, Baroness Pannonica Rothschild, known as Nica, led a life as dazzling and turbulent as the jazz music she adored. From her early days at the grand Tring Park Mansion, to her rebellious escapades, to fighting for the free French forces in Africa, and her eventual immersion in the vibrant, often controversial jazz scene that saw her accused of murder, jailed, cast out by her family to eventually becoming the patron saint of many struggling Black musicians who would immortalize her in more than 20 songs. Nica's journey was nothing short of extraordinary. Her childhood, shadowed by her father's tragic death and strict upbringing, set the stage for a life of defiance and independence. The Bebop Princess, as she would be called, shattered societal norms, championed racial integration, and supported struggling artists with unwavering loyalty. Her story is a testament to the power of passion and resilience, painting a vivid portrait of a woman who lived life on her own terms, leaving an indelible mark on the world of jazz and beyond. Join us this week as we look at the remarkable life of Baroness Rothschild. Pannonica Rothschild, born on December 10th, 1913, into a family whose wealth surpassed that of kings, belonged to a dynasty with banks that financed monarchs and governments. Her father, Nathaniel Charles Rothschild, was a distinguished member of the Rothschild banking family. Though he worked in the family's London bank, his true passion lay in entomology, a passion subtly reflected in the naming of his daughter. Her mother, Baroness Rogica Edla von Wertheimstein, the daughter of a Transylvanian baron, presided over their grand estate, Tring Park Mansion, with meticulous care, managing its vast grounds and numerous staff. Charles and Rosica had 4 children: Miriam, known as Liberty, Victor, Elizabeth, and the youngest, Pannonica. She despised her given name, often telling the unaware that she was named after a rare butterfly, when in fact she was named after a Hungarian moth. Throughout her life, she would be known as Nica. Their home, the lavish and historic Tring Park Mansion, was a vibrant and magical place, reflecting the Rothschild family's immense wealth and eclectic interests. The estate housed a remarkable collection of exotic animals, including giant tortoises, kangaroos, zebras, emus, and a variety of birds and mammals from around the world. Like a scene from a fantasy novel, her uncle drove a zebra-drawn carriage around the property, and footmen carried cherry trees to the dining table so the family could eat the fruit straight from the branches. Yet, her childhood was far from a fairy tale. In a scene reminiscent of an Evelyn Waugh novel, the girls were dressed in pristine white dresses, strictly forbidden from soiling them, and subjected to a rigorous regime under the watchful eyes of nannies and governesses. Their only respite came when their father returned home on weekends, taking them on woodland walks and imparting his knowledge of insects and animals. However, Charles suffered from a severe mood disorder, oscillating between days of silence and bouts of incessant talking. He loathed his work at the bank, feeling a profound responsibility to the family name, and longed instead to immerse himself in nature as an entomologist. His weeks at the bank deepened his depression, culminating tragically when one day he locked himself in the bathroom and took his own life. Nica, just 10 years old, was profoundly affected by his death. She had never realized her loving father was struggling, and this loss shaped her desire to help others facing similar battles, teaching her to live life on her own terms rather than conforming to others' expectations. Liberty shared her father's psychological demons and suffered from schizophrenia. Nica, the wild child, would sneak friends onto the property and host wine-soaked parties at just 16. Her mother found her impossible to manage and sent her to a finishing school in Paris, hoping to refine her. Nica loathed the school and its teachers, whom she dismissively called lascivious lesbians. While in Paris, Nica discovered a love for flying, and by 21, she had a pilot's license and her own plane. Despite her reluctance, she finally agreed to attend a debutante party graced by Winston Churchill. The beautiful heiress dazzled in strings of emeralds and diamonds, but always felt like she was living in a gilded cage, destined to become a society matron and mother. Soon after, she met Baron Jules de Koenigswarter, a French diplomat and jazz enthusiast. He was smitten when he saw her alight from her plane, which she had just flown across the English Channel. On their first date, he took her on a flight in his Leopard Moth aircraft. He was a decade older, a widower with a son, and they bonded over their love of aviation. However, in a display of his overconfidence, he demanded that she marry him rather than simply asking. True to her rebellious nature, she flew off to New York. Jules, undeterred, pursued her relentlessly, and after weeks of persistence, she finally agreed to be his bride, a decision she would deeply regret. They married in New York City and embarked on a honeymoon that reflected Nica's adventurous spirit. While Jules planned most of it, he conceded to her whims, making it the happiest time of their marriage. They smoked opium in Peking, crashed a plane, and survived on chocolate and booze in a roach-infested motel. In Japan, Jules won a sake drinking competition. They also visited an adult toy shop and sent obscene gifts to family members as a joke. After their honeymoon, the couple settled in a 17th century mansion in France, where they raised their children, Patrick and Janka, often left in the care of nannies. Early in the marriage, Nica assumed the traditional role of a society matriarch, spending her days choosing menus, managing staff, and hosting distinguished guests. However, the monotony and her domineering husband bored her, and their marriage began to fray. However, all this was about to change. When the Germans were on the verge of taking control of France, Jules joined de Gaulle's Free French forces in the Congo. Nica, a prime target as a Jew and a Rothschild, refused to leave France, opening her doors to refugees. Within weeks, she had 60 evacuees sleeping in her guest rooms. As the Germans closed in, Jules warned her that they had to leave immediately. The family left at dawn, walking with other refugees to a port where they boarded the last ship to London. Tragically, she begged her mother-in-law to join them, but she refused to leave her home and later perished in Auschwitz. This move likely saved Nica's life, as many of her husband's extended family and her own mother's relatives were lost in the Holocaust. Drawn into the vortex of war, Nica deposited her children with the Guggenheim family on Long Island and joined the French Free Army. She secured passage on a Norwegian freighter, hitching a perilous ride to West Africa in search of her husband. Within weeks, she battled malaria, sunstroke, and narrowly survived a car crash. Upon finding Jules, she swiftly made herself indispensable, decoding messages, driving, working as a nurse, and hosting a radio show where she broadcast jazz records and anti-German propaganda. Whispers even suggested she piloted a Lancaster bomber. Soon, she earned the rank of lieutenant. In Paris, her home became a sanctuary for Allied soldiers. For her valor, she was awarded France's second highest honor for Heroes of the Liberation. The war rekindled their romance, and back in Paris, they had 3 more children. Yet monotony returned as Jules joined the diplomatic service, moving them to Norway and Mexico. Nica found the role of an ambassador's wife stifling, later calling it complete bullshit. Often absent or late to official dinners, her husband retaliated by smashing her vinyl records, creating a nightly cacophony of breaking records, shouting, and whispering servants. Desperately needing an escape, she was invited to New York to listen to Duke Ellington's symphony, Black, Brown, and Beige, which echoed the history of African Americans, feeling an immediate connection to the music. Instead of returning to Mexico, she visited her brother's old music teacher, Teddy Wilson, who introduced her to Thelonious Monk's Round Midnight. Enraptured, she played it 20 times in a row, missed her flight, and took a suite at the Stanhope Hotel on Fifth Avenue. To the management's dismay, she opened her suite to impoverished African-American musicians. Despite the hotel's segregationist policies, her illustrious name, title, and wealth made them turn a blind eye. Nica purchased a blue Bentley, donned a leopard skin coat, and sipped expensive whiskey from a flask. She became a fixture in Greenwich Village nightclubs, where alcohol and cigarettes were tolerated, but jazz and its musicians were not. In 1954, discovering Monk was in Paris, she flew to meet him, declaring him the most beautiful man she had ever seen. Nica became a patron to struggling musicians, defying societal taboos of race, religion, and class. She was determined to make Monk a household name, becoming his staunchest supporter and friend for the rest of his life. Her husband was infuriated, deeming her lifestyle unbecoming of a mother, a diplomat's wife, or a Rothschild. Nevertheless, anxious to avoid scandal and conscious of the weight of her heiress status, he fumed in silence until an event forced his hand. In 1955, saxophone genius Charlie Bird Parker arrived at Nica's suite, desperately ill with no other place to go. Although aware of the impropriety, she saw his suffering and never considered turning him away. Soon after he died, igniting a frenzy of public and press speculation. Questions abounded. Why did it take 48 hours to report Parker's death? Nica claimed she wanted to inform his estranged wife first, but skeptics were relentless. Why did the medical examiner visit her room? Why was his body mislabeled and left in the morgue? Rumors persisted that Nica had shot Parker after an argument, fueled by her known penchant for carrying a pistol and her occasional antics of shooting out hotel lights. Nica's niece even received an email from someone claiming to have witnessed the murder, though this person was never identified and no evidence supported the claim. Despite the improbability of such an event, Parker arrived near death and would likely have died on the street had she not taken him in. The fact that a black jazz musician died in a blue blood residence spurred wild speculation and sensational headlines like "Bird in the Baroness's Boudoir." The Rothschilds were aghast, and her husband promptly filed for divorce. Years later, he lamented, "Jazz didn't do my family any good." He received custody of the children, a decision Nica did not contest. Reflecting on her choices, she later said, after hearing Thelonious Monk, "I knew I had to break free from my former bullshit life." The Stanhope, which had previously turned a blind eye, now demanded her departure. Relocating to another hotel, she soon faced the same issue due to segregation policies, which Nica found absurd and ignored. Eventually, she purchased a house in New Jersey with a breathtaking view of the Manhattan skyline. Her home, whimsically named Catville, hosted not only jazz musicians but also 306 felines, all named after musicians. Many were strays Nica had rescued while driving her Bentley, the same Bentley she would drag race against Miles Davis down 7th Avenue. Her neighbors, deeply unhappy with the situation, were met with Nica's typical humor. "You can know which house is mine because it is the only one on the block without a for sale sign." She lavished her largesse on the languishing jazz musicians, using her wealth to establish studios and provide recording funds. She became the patron saint of jazz musicians, though many affectionately dubbed her the Bebop Baroness. Yet, it was the mercurial Monk who became the magnum opus of her life. Like Nica's father, Monk was plagued by mental health issues, and his addiction only amplified the agony. His mood swung wildly. He endured sleepless nights. Nica paid his bills, tolerated his schizophrenia, and was ever present in his times of need. In return, he immortalized her in melodies destined to define the era. One of the times she helped him most was on October 15, 1958. Nica, Monk, and a musician named Charlie Rouse were en route to a gig when Monk asked Nica to pull over for a restroom break. West of the Mason-Dixon line, segregation still reigned, and it took some time to find a motel with an all-welcome sign. Monk used the facilities while Nica and Charlie waited outside. When he asked the desk clerk for a glass of water, she panicked and summoned the authorities. Back in the car, Monk was approached by an officer who demanded he step out. Ignoring the request, Monk incited the officer's ire. Despite Nica's explanations, the officers dragged Monk from the car and beat him unconscious. She pleaded for them to stop, begging them to be careful of his hands. A search of the car, conducted only after Nica inquired about the charges, uncovered marijuana. Although the contraband belonged to Monk, Nica knew that a conviction would strip him of his cabaret card and his livelihood. She bravely positioned herself between Monk and the officers, claiming the drugs as hers. Arrested, she spent the night in jail and faced a 3-year sentence, which was eventually dismissed. By the 1960s, Monk had achieved widespread acclaim, much of which he credited to Nica. But as the decade progressed, his mental health further declined, worsened by heroin use. Nica and Monk's wife, Nellie, clashed over his care, but Nica prevailed and Monk moved into her New Jersey home. She remained his steadfast pillar until his death from a heart attack in 1982. During the funeral procession, her blue Bentley broke down, a poignant metaphor for the end of an era. At his funeral, Nica and Nellie sat side by side, and mourners honored both women as if they were widows. On the topic of whether she and Monk were lovers, she remained circumspect, Monk's son Toot believed Nica was in love with his father, saying he was a good-looking cat and she was a hottie. But there were never any signs of affection beyond kisses on the cheek. When asked if they'd ever slept together, Monk replied, "Why would I do that to my best friend?" Long estranged from her relatives, Nica's great-niece, Hannah Rothschild, became intrigued by the Rothschild who had been expunged from the family tree. Hannah phoned her and asked for a meeting. "Wild," replied Nica. "Come to the club downtown after midnight." There she saw the 71-year-old Baroness adorned in a pearl necklace and magnificent fur coat, symbols of the life she had left behind, holding court, smoking a cigarette in a long black filter, and drinking whiskey from a chipped china cup. Hannah asked her, "Why?" Nica, swaying to the music, replied, "Remember, there is only one life." In November of 1988, Nica underwent a triple aortic coronary bypass. She hoped to make a full recovery, but after 74 years of hard living, a few car crashes, and even a brief bout of cancer, her heart gave up. Her name lives on. Nica asked every musician she met to tell her the 3 things they wanted most, and her children published those interviews in The Musicians and Their 3 Wishes. Miles Davis answered, "To be white." Armstrong said to live 100 years, and Monk said to have a wonderful friend like you. In her will, she requested that her family cremate her body, hire a boat, and scatter her ashes on the Hudson River, with the specific instruction that it should be done round midnight. Thus, the melody that had forever changed her life became the final note of her journey. As the sun set on the life of Pannonica Rothschild, it cast elongated shadows over a tapestry woven with threads of opulence, the haunting echoes of war, and the rugged fabric of rebellion. Born into the gilded cage of aristocracy, she chose the road less traveled. Her existence was a jazz rhapsody of contradictions, from the manicured elegance of Tring Park Mansion to the smoky, pulsating heart of Greenwich Village, from the rigid tempos of high society to the unbounded improvisation of bebop. Nica, the patron saint of jazz, lavished her fortune on the destitute, becoming the Bebop Baroness. Her life, a symphony of tragic love, relentless devotion, and fierce defiance, mirrored the syncopated struggles and triumphs of the music she cherished. Nica discerned the melody within the madness, revealing to the world the soul behind the strife. Her legacy, like a haunting, unforgettable riff, lingers in the air, a testament that there is indeed only one life, and Nica lived hers unapologetically with passion, courage, and unyielding grace. I hope you enjoyed this week's story on Pannonica Rothschild. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and who you would like to see us cover next. Please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps keep the channel going. And as always, thanks for watching.